Thanks, Dr. Goche. The main focus of this is on plug production, and the summary is right there on the title screen. If you do have questions and you want to talk to me about this in further detail, my email is simply shawn.wright@uky.edu. And plug production is simple, but it's not easy. Strawberries in general want to grow when it's cool and damp. They can get weedy. I've often talked with older extension horticulture people over the years, and we often say that the biggest weed in a strawberry patch is another strawberry plant that just grows in because they do want to grow. However, the process itself is simple, but it's not easy. There's a few things that you're going to have to think about as we go on, and we will talk about that. I do want to offer special thanks to Dr. Barclay Poling, retired NCSU professor, small fruit expert. He's primarily the one that got this whole plasticulture system expanded in the East beyond Florida, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to him. Brad Bergerford and Tom Harker were colleagues of mine at Ohio State University. I started there in 2001 when they were just beginning the plasticulture industry in Ohio as well. So we've been at this for almost 25 years now and things, but couldn't have done it without their efforts along the way. Standard disclaimer, if I do mention a trade name, I'm not meant to imply or something or discriminate something that's equally suitable. I'm just get old and set in my ways. How does this whole process begin? Runner tips are hand harvested. It's back-breaking work. There's growers that go through the fields. The nurseries and breeders will send mother plants to the stock plant producers who will then grow out the mother plants, cut the runners off of those. They'll send them to the plug producers. Uh, so it's not just a matter of contact a nursery or a breeder and say, I want 100 of your plants and I'm going to produce my own tips. It has to start before that. They are hand harvested. They have these little carts right here that are separated with the cardboard dividers. 100 runner tips go in each slot. There's 10 slots in there, which gives them 1,000 tips per box. And these are sold in boxes of 1,000. And that's what it looks like when it comes in and when it goes into the cooler. They'll put them in a cooler and they'll ship them out to you. And what you'll find often is that if you do get involved in the tip production, it often costs more to get the material shipped than it would for the tips themselves, or at least that was our experience at Ohio State. And that Brad would often run up to Niagara Falls from Southern Ohio just to save on the shipping costs and the cross-border requirements and things like that. So because most of these were coming out of Canada, you also have international restrictions on shipping plants and things to think about. Your first challenge has to be consider where are you going to get your tips. Here in Kentucky, we actually have a window. We like to aim for that window of September 10th to September 20th is kind of our planting window for central Kentucky, a little bit earlier in eastern Kentucky, a little bit later in western Kentucky. But in order to do that, in order to plant your plug plants in that time frame, you actually need your runner tips the first week in August, late July, somewhere in there to get a 4 to 5 week old plug plant. That's what we really want. We've gone to the field before with older plug plants. They haven't done very well compared to a 4 to 5 week old plant. They get root bound. They just don't do quite as well. Anything a little bit younger than that, the root ball can be a little bit weak and fall apart. So that 4 to 5 week old plant is ideally what you're looking for, which means that the tips would come in late July. You'd get them stuck and then they'd be ready to go to the field. People also say, well, what about holding your own plants through the summer? Christy Durbin, who manages our CSA farm in Lexington for the university, they have actually cut some of their own tips as well to grow out their own things for the organic CSA. They start cutting as early as mid-July, so you're going to the field with a little bit older plant Also, the concern with doing that is, as Dr. Gauthier and I have talked about this before, is how do you keep your plants healthy during the summertime? Because you have plants that tend to like to grow when it's cool. Kentucky is not known for its cool summers. They will go dormant in the summer. And so then you have to get them growing again to get them producing the runner tips if you want. There's also diseases. Anthracnose is particularly a warm, wet disease that can fire up in your plants and things. So if you do carry over your own plants with the idea of cutting your own tips from them, you have to make sure that you keep those plants healthy during the summer. Watch for disease and things, because if you cut diseased runner tips from your plants, you're just going to be ending up with diseased plugs. I do like to encourage our growers to follow the spray schedules that Dr. Gauthier has been put out. I know the cost of chemicals has gone up like everything else. People always say, well, maybe I can just cut back on one spray or something. But those early sprays are critical because, as she has said, once the disease is in there, it's in there. You're not going to cure it. So hit it early and hit it hard to control your diseases. So that's your first challenge, is where are you going to get your tips? Once you've got your tips, assuming you can get them, hand sort them, and then we plug them. It does make a difference if you sort them by size, because not every runner tip is going to be the same size. They just go down the row and cut them off and throw them in. If you put different size tips in your plug trays, some will get wetter than others, some will grow faster than others. So we have looked at that, and it does make a difference if you sort them out by size. Also, if you remove some of the leaves and things, often there's too many leaves on a runner tip. You really want 2 to 3 leaves per runner tip. Some people will even go to the extent of orienting them so that they're all facing the same direction, so that when the mist kicks on, it's a uniform system. Anything that you can do to get uniformity in your system is going to enhance the productivity of the system, but it also increases the cost of the system because you have more labor involved. And we all know that labor is expensive. We use a soilless mix, plastic tray, 50 cell insert. This is an automatic tray filler right there. This is what it looks like. We filled them by hand before. Works very well. Something like a Pro Mix or something like that works very well. You simply take the runner tip. There's a little hook end where it's cut off. You hook that into the media and they start growing for you. You want to make sure that your media stays moist but not saturated. As I said, strawberries really are weeds, and if you provide the appropriate conditions for them, they're going to grow for you. Here's just a couple more shots of that. Taking one that didn't have a good hook on it, just pressing it down in there into the soilless media, and it will take over. Another close-up shot of that. Another shot, it's down in there. And that's a fully planted tray right there. As you can see, they're kind of wilted over. They will look like that for a day or so, but once you get them stuck, you're going to put them either in your propagation greenhouse or put them in the field. We've done them both in high tunnels. I've seen people that do them in greenhouses on a mist bed system. We've also done them in the field. This is what a good runner tip that's healthy and growing well is going to look like just after 4 days. You should have those nice fine white roots coming out of that runner tip. This was at the OSU Enterprise Center in Hillsboro, Ohio. We had them in a heated greenhouse. It was a plastic covered greenhouse, very similar to a high tunnel, but we did have heat in it. Mist system right there. The advantage to doing them inside is they're not subject to winds, because winds, anything that's going to dry out those trays is going to be your enemy. So inside where they're protected is certainly easier than growing them outside on a landscape fabric covered bed, but you can certainly do them outside as well. This is a Chandler plant after 1 week under the mist system. You've got nice, strong, healthy root systems coming in. You've got new leaves beginning already. This is what they look like. After we took them out of the greenhouse, we put them out in the field after about 4 weeks to harden off. And at that point, they're only getting irrigated about once or twice a day, usually once in the morning, once in the afternoon, and they're ready to go to the field at that point. After 3.5 weeks under a mist system, that root ball should hold together in the cell tray. You should be able to pull the plant out and it shouldn't fall apart on you. That's why by 4 weeks, that's kind of like the earliest we're looking at for getting those plants into the field. 5 weeks, they can start to get a little bit root bound in there. I've had people ask, do you have to use the round cells or can you use the square cells? Honestly, we've done both. Do I think it matters? Not particularly. I'm more concerned that you're getting healthy plants and that you're getting your fungicide treatments on in time instead of whether you're using round or square plugs. I don't really think that that's a big concern. That's that final tweak to get that 1 or 2%, whereas many of our growers are still trying to get that first 80% of things done in a timely manner and in an ideal way. The second challenge with the mist system is, do you like plumbing? Can you fix things when they leak? Because this is a plumbing project. It's that simple. Are you willing to get things to work how they need to, especially if you're doing this in a high tunnel or where it's going to be more subject to drying, wind conditions and things? That's the sort of thing that you're going to be watching for is you're going to have to adjust your mist schedule because some days will be overcast, some days won't be overcast. So those are things that you need to think about. In terms of the actual hardware of a mist system, a propagation timer like you would use in a greenhouse system, they operate for short durations in terms of seconds, regular frequency in terms of minutes, and an extended operation period of roughly 12 hours. So you could have a propagation timer or you could have a controller system that's hooked up to a solenoid valve and do it that way. If you do that, then you get into being an electrician as well as a plumber. Typically a 3/4 inch or 1 inch line, a 20 psi pressure reducer, and then like a mini wobbler or some type of misting head is used on that. People say, well, what's the offset on that? All of that is based upon irrigation. That's where you have to be a little bit of an engineer to look at this and figure out, if my pressure is this high, what distance am I getting the water spread and everything else? The truth is, we just kind of put lots of valves in our system, adjusted it, have more. You always want to have redundancy in your system because invariably something is going to break at the wrong time. You don't want one run of your irrigation system to go out at 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning or even worse, 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning and not have any backup wobblers and pipe dope and things to repair things with, pressure reducers and everything else that you're going to need because things will invariably break for you. If you use a tea spray head, we've used that, typically 7.5 by 7.5 foot spacing mini wobblers, 15 by 15, but it really depends how high your risers are going to be for that. Like to put ground cover down underneath that propagation trays just to prevent any spread of soil-borne diseases into your plugs as well. It also inhibits weed growth because if you have a nice overhead irrigation or mist irrigation system going there, weeds are going to love to grow in that system as well as your strawberry plants. Put them under the mist right after hooking, greenhouse, shade house outside. This was a small planting that I did here in Breathitt County. When I first got down here, we were growing some things down here, and we just set up our own little mist system down here in a shade house that we had set up. Doesn't have to be big. That provided all the plants I needed right there for the system. Typically, you will fertilize starting 18 to 21 days. Dilute solution of triple 20 or 20-10-20. Dilute solution would be 1 pound of water soluble fertilizer per 100 gallons of water. And finally, the third major challenge of this whole system is, are you going to be around to monitor this system? Can you adapt as conditions change? Are you good at growing plants? Because this system is unforgiving. Those first 3 to 5 days, you have to be there pretty much babysitting those plants from sunup or 8 o'clock when the sun hits those plants until early evening when you turn off the water system for the evening. Because in the evening, the sun goes down, the trays aren't going to dry out as quick, so you don't need to run it through the evening typically, unless it's really hot or something, which it can be in August, and in which case you might want to kick it on once or twice to help cool those plants. But typically you don't run it through the night. But if those plants dry out those first 3 to 5 days, say you get your plants hooked, the trays are out, the mist system is running, you have something else going on the farm, you have to go to a farmer's market, you say, well, I just have to run to the farmer's market, I'll only be there 4 hours. And as soon as you leave the farm, the water goes out, those trays sit dry for 4 hours. When you come back, you might as well forget about it, because they're not going to recover well for you at all, and you've lost your crop for the season. So yeah, I commend Tom Harker. He really was our research assistant, really did an excellent job in growing those plants. But it was a lot of work, a lot of babysitting for those things. It's just like when you have infants and things, you have to keep an eye on them all the time, because you can't leave them for hours at a time and just ignore them. But once you do get through that first 3 to 5 days, here's just a sample schedule. And again, your situation is going to be unique. I don't know if it's going to be overcast where you're at. I don't know how hot it's going to be. I don't know how windy it's going to be. This is just kind of a ballpark schedule. Day one, 20 seconds every 2.5 minutes. So you can see why that standard greenhouse propagation timer is necessary. Your standard timer that you would buy for your soaker hoses and put out on your tomatoes that you get at the Ace Hardware or somewhere else isn't going to be enough, because that time interval isn't short enough and it doesn't come on frequently enough in order to do it. So that greenhouse propagation timer is a critical system in it. 20 seconds every 2.5 minutes, morning to evening, might be 10 seconds every 3 minutes, give or take. By day two, those new runner tips should be standing upright in the morning. You'd follow a similar schedule. By day three, you can cut it back possibly a little bit, but again, that depends upon your weather conditions and how your plants are doing. And you might find, as I said, some of those runner tips are going to be bigger than others. So some will grow faster than others. Some of those trays might dry out faster than others. These are living things. You always have to keep an eye on them. And that's one of those things you have to ask yourself. Do you really like growing plants? Anybody can be trained to water plants, but that doesn't mean that everybody is going to be good at it. And you kind of have a passion for growing plants if you're going to do this well. By day 4 to 5, you're cutting back maybe every 15 seconds for every 5 minutes. But remember, don't get that media saturated. If you pick up those trays and they feel heavy, they're too wet. You want water droplets on the leaves continuously. Conservative estimate, 10 seconds every 10 minutes. By day 6, you should definitely see rooting in those trays, as you saw with those pictures I showed earlier. Even within the first 4 days, some of your better tips should actually be putting out those nice, young, healthy white roots and things. Beyond day 6, you're lengthening that interval between mist bursts and just kind of kicking it back. And again, it's all a matter of trial and error and what feels right. And that's what I say, there is a science behind this, but there's just as much art behind it. It's like grafting. I tell my agents that I can teach them the science behind grafting, and I can graft, but I don't have the art behind it. I figure if I get 60% success on my apple grafts, I'm happy with that. It's not my skill set. Same thing with growing runner tips. That's why I encourage people, people might say, well, these plugs are so expensive. Now you see why it's expensive. It's not easy work. It's labor intensive, and it is difficult. you can do it. And for some of our growers, if you do want to try that, we do have a lot of growers here in Kentucky that are smaller growers. If you do want to try and carry over your plants, you can certainly do that. Talk to myself, talk to your county agent, talk to Dr. Goche about what you can do to keep those plants healthiest during the summer. If you only need 500 plants or something, you could set up something very simple and do this yourself. But if you're looking at doing a half acre or an acre, you need to be talking to the plug producers or really commit yourself into this and be willing to do what's required to produce healthy plugs. So, with that, again, I'll be happy to try and answer any questions. I forgot to mention, I do have a very simple handout on the hardware and how to build your own little mist system if you want, similar to what I had out. People can just send me an email and I can uh, send that PDF to them as well.